On this episode of the Dairyland Initiative podcast, we're going to be talking about claw lesions. Hi, I'm Courtney Hallbach.
And I'm Nigel Cook.
And this is the Dairyland Initiative podcast,
where we get to discuss issues related to the housing and management of dairy cattle.
Let's dive in. I think we're on a roll with lameness and foot health, so why not start again with more lameness and hoof health?
Well, I know how you like to see these lovely pictures of these grotesque lesions of cows' feet.
Yeah, that's why I wake up every day and come into work.
Yeah, and hopefully you haven't had too much to eat for breakfast.
Nope, I resisted today.
Good.
Knowing what was coming.
Yeah, I just listened on my way into your session with Dr. Dopfer.
I thought it went pretty well.
You looked a little squeamish at times.
I was. She showed some pretty disgusting photos.
Those gnarly proliferative lesions with the little tentacles poking out.
When I signed up for this job, I wasn't expecting to seeing such grotesque feet.
Well, bring it on. We're going to do more of that today.
Great. Hopefully my breakfast stays down.
We're going to switch focus and talk a little bit about the history, because I'm only here for the history.
You're old enough to talk about history.
I'm here for the history of what we've learned about clawhorn lesion development over the years.
All right.
I'm going to bring you bang up to date with our current approach.
Okay.
So this gets to our targets for lameness in our dairy herds. We have different scoring systems, but overall, whatever scoring system you're using for lameness, we want to make sure that fewer than 10% of the cows are walking with a noticeable limp. So this is the cow on the left here. You can see she's got a slight arch in her back. She's got a little bit of weight transfer because of that painful foot.
Head down.
Yep. And then basically 0 or certainly less than 1% severely lame, which is a cow that's barely able to bear weight.
Yeah, she can hardly walk.
So you can see she's really struggling, and we really don't want those kind of cows in our herd.
Yeah.
Okay. So why are the cows lame? Well, we've talked for many years about the 90% rule.
This is maybe something.
Apparently, I haven't talked with you about the 90% rule.
Yeah, what is the 90% rule?
The 90% rule was that most of the lameness in dairy cattle is in the rear feet, in the rear limb, 90%. So not the front feet, but the rear. Most of it's in the foot. And for the most part, that's still true to this day. You talked about digital dermatitis, which again is more common in the rear feet in one of our previous episodes. And we've talked a little bit about white line lesions, white line disease, also more common in the rear feet. And today we're going to touch on one more of the famous 5, the famous 5 hoof lesions, covering 90% of the hoof lesions that cause lameness in our dairy cows. There's some grisly pictures for you, Courtney.
Yeah, thanks. And now, what's the other 10%? You can't just leave me hanging here with 90%.
Oh, the other 10%? That's just weird stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's weird stuff. Upper limb can be a problem occasionally. Injuries, but there are probably about 15 other lesions that I'm not going to talk about.
Thank goodness.
Because these 5 get you to 90%.
Okay, I like that. Let's
so
just focus on what's...
if we're solving herd lameness problems, let's focus on these.
Let's not waste our time.
Exactly. So we've talked previously about digital dermatitis, about white lines. We're going to focus here today on the good old sole ulcer.
Yay.
And that's about the third or so in our incidence of lameness. We've shown you this graphic before. Probably the most common lesion we see in our dairy cows is digital dermatitis, followed closely by white lines and real close sole ulcers and sole hemorrhage right there. And then we'll maybe talk in the future about these others, thin soles and foot rot. So there you go, nice close-up. What is a sole ulcer, Courtney?
A sole hemorrhage?
That's a hemorrhage. So you see that little red splash in a freshly trimmed hoof. And you see this redness trapped in the horn. That's actually blood that's been trapped in the horn as it's formed. So we'll see that. But an ulcer is this full thickness defect of the sole thickness. It goes all the way through the sole.
That sounds really painful.
Yeah. And they form from the inside out. not
Okay.
the outside in. So this isn't something that's poked the sole and made a hole. It's something that's developed because the horn has failed to grow normally. And it's usually in what we call this typical site. The outer claw, because the outer claw is often overgrown, is bearing greater weight. So that's very commonly seen there. And this location, if you imagine the anatomy inside the foot, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, but there's a pedal bone. There's the last bone of the skeleton inside that claw, and it's the back edge, right on the back inside edge is the typical site, and that's where those ulcers typically form. So a real classic ulcer. So when I was young, when I was as
That
young
was
as
years
you,
ago.
Courtney, my hair was a lot darker and there was more of it.
I've been telling him he needs to darken his hair a bit. He's
You know, Chris
starting to get a
Isley in
little
our
white.
shop, he kind of uses some kind of hair product.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it's
you
been-
might want to get tips from him.
I don't know. My father and my grandfather all grayed gracefully. I just think, that shock of white hair.
It
I
makes
can-
you wiser.
Yeah, that's exactly
think.
right. The glasses, the grey hair, there's
Sure.
kind of the stoop, the scoliosis.
So
It's all about getting older and wiser.
okay, all these things have allowed you to talk about what was happening in the 90s, apparently.
Right, exactly. And back then, we looked at sole hemorrhage and sole ulcer as a nutritional disease. This was called laminitis.
So you were throwing nutritionists under the bus.
It was their fault. Yeah, they were getting blamed all the time for lameness outbreaks. Still are to a degree, but now we've got some cover for them coming up. But this was because there wasn't a heck of a lot of research done in cattle, and there was this condition called laminitis in horses, where you saw hemorrhage in the sole horn and the wall, and that was believed to be a nutritional disease, and views have changed a little bit with that one as well more recently. But we just kind of exchanged cow for horse and said, oh, this is laminitis, and it's acidosis driven. Yeah, lots of carbohydrate feeding, creating acidosis in the rumen, and it was a consequence of that.
Okay.
So there were a few people that decided to test that, and one of the early ones was Dr. Christer Bergsten. And when I first came to the UW, Christer had visited with Ken Nordland and visited our shop, and he said he knew I was kind of interested in lameness. So Ken said, the two people you got to meet and interact with, he said, you got to go and watch hoof trimming with Carl Berge.
Okay.
And so there started a 26-year relationship with Carl.
So that's how it started.
That's all how it started. I went and rode with Carl and kind of learned how he was foot trimming. And then he said, you also got to meet Christer Bergsten because he's really into your stuff. And so Christer did this experiment way back in the mid-90s. And he took 60 heifers, healthy heifers, and they were in a tie stall. Okay, so they're housed in a tie stall. They're in early pregnancy. And he basically put them in tie stalls either with miserable sort of concrete surface with a little bit of bedding or what they viewed as a soft rubber mat in those days, which would still be pretty appalling for us 26 years later. But those are the two treatments. So a softer surface and a harder surface. And also, he manipulated the diet. So he gave one group a lot of grain and the other group less grain. So 6.5 kilos versus 0.4 kilos if you're watching along. And you would expect with a nutrition-related laminitis that overfeeding of grain would result in lameness.
Yeah.
Yep. Got nothing.
Wow.
So he's scoring feet, looking for hemorrhage scores. Got nothing.
Okay, so this is good news for the nutritionist.
Maybe, but Christer was not to be thwarted by this. He said, okay, we're going to do this again. But this time he did it before and after calving. So lost a couple of heifers along the way. So now we're down from 60 heifers to 56. And this study went from 3 weeks before calving to 13 weeks after calving in the same tie stalls with the same concrete or rubber flooring and not exactly the same diet because now you're dealing with lactation.
Yeah.
So, but a high and a low concentrate diet.
Okay.
So a similar kind of treatment. Yeah. So you're manipulating diet, you're manipulating environment, but here you've also got calving in the recipe. Okay. This time you got differences. There was an effect of concrete bad, and there was an effective high concentrate diet, also bad. So we saw more sole hemorrhages in those groups. So this was kind of one of the first studies, and there have been numerous since, that understood there's something going on here related to feeding, related to calving,
But
and
then
related
also that
to the environment. Yeah.
And you've taken on the environment component.
That's been the bit that I've certainly focused on, and I'll try to explain why in a moment.
Okay.
But yeah, numerous studies. The professor that taught me, John Webster, did a number of studies. There was a group in Scotland that did a number of studies. So a lot of, you read through the literature, this was kind of that start, that mid-90s, everybody started to look at this, particularly in heifers. So particularly around first calving. And then Christoph Leischer came along, and he showed us at the Florida lameness meeting in the early 2000s. So this is 2002. Had these wonderful pictures and specimens showing the suspensory apparatus of the third phalanx, the pedal bone, the last bone of the skeleton. And he was highlighting these connective tissue strands that suspended the pedal bone in this claw capsule.
Okay.
And suggested that when we saw lesions, it was because of the pressure created on the horn-producing cells below the back edge of that third phalanx. As it moved down, as that collagen and elastin and those connective tissues stretched, and the cow bore weight, then the pedal bone shifted and then put pressure on those cells. And John Webster and John Talton, they did some studies to show that there were enzymes, gelatoproteinases, that were upregulated and activated around calving time. And we're aware of hormonal changes at calving time in animals. The calf has to pass through the pelvis, and to do that, a lot of the connective tissue of the pelvis softens to allow that passage. Well, the foot has the same kind of connective tissue, and hormones like relaxin are involved in the enzymatic changes that take place in the elasticity and the softness of those tissues. And so they stretch. And so Christoph Leischer put the anatomy together, and really this changed the way we started to look at these lesions. So these are lesions of pressure below the pedal bone caused by displacement.
Around that point of calving.
Yeah. So that one of the reasons would be around calving time, and that's what the UK was seeing. Because remember, if you don't know how they raise heifers in the UK, at pasture.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're down by the church, down the meadows by that beautiful river.
Sounds picturesque.
Yeah, picturesque. And then we'd bring them suddenly in at the point of calving, get them to calve, and then whack, they'd be in a housed environment with some not very pretty cubicle housing, concrete.
Look at you using cubicle housing.
Cubicle housing. So, yeah, shout out to my UK brethren. Free stalls. But yeah, huge insult of diet change, of housing change, and calving.
Yeah.
So this all started to make sense from that perspective. Then we started to look at things like the digital fat pad. So not only was the pedal bone suspended by the connective tissue holding it within the claw capsule, but it was cushioned from below by these fat pads. And this is an amazing German paper that sort of highlighted the anatomy of these three fat pads, with these kind of two cushioning fingery fat pads, one from one side, one from the other, and then the solid big fat pad underneath the bone in the middle. And what we realized there was that fat pad is an important part of the suspensory apparatus.
Okay.
And Rodrigo Bacalhau was one of the first to show that fat pad changes in its consistency and thickness through lactation. So it kind of mirrors changes in body condition score. So thin cows had thin fat pads and fat cows had thick fat pads, and you saw this kind of decline in the thickness of the fat pad at peak yield. So in the US, we tend not to raise our heifers on pasture.
No.
Some do, but most don't. We don't have the sort of huge change in environment that they were seeing in Europe. And a lot of our sole ulcers and sole hemorrhage weren't occurring very early in lactation. They weren't parturition related. They were peak yield related.
I was just going to say, so we're starting to see this now.
Yeah, so they
cows
were
are-
more in the sort of 50, 100 days in milk. That's when we'd start to see our sole ulcer cows formation for the first time. And Rodrigo was able to show that cows with sole ulcers had thinner fat pads, and healthy cows had thicker fat pads. So this fat pad started to look exciting as a potential, reason why, another reason why we were getting problems of sole hemorrhage and sole ulcer. So these are some cross-sectional pictures where we've dyed the fat pad in yellow, and the suspensory apparatus we've dyed in green. So you can see here pretty nice, healthy claws. And as I just swiped there, what we see when we get lesion development is this loss of claw angle due to the erosion of
but
the
the
heel.
yellow fat pad is essentially gone.
The fat pad kind of dissipates. The weight axis kind of shifts back to that back edge of the pedal bone. That's where we're getting pressure. You can actually see here the hemorrhage already trapped in the sole from a prior insult where you've got bleeding into the corium as the horn is being produced. And the sole ulcer is basically a full thickness defect because you've got total shutdown of horn production caused by pressure in that location. And so from that point on, we kind of get, okay, so this is a bit more complicated than we used to think. It's not feed related. There are other pathways that create this displacement and this pressure.
Yeah.
With me?
I am. So I'm hoping
Good.
you get to the environmental
We'll get there,
aspect
Courtney.
at some
We'll get
point.
there. Patience. Patience,
I'm
young one.
impatient.
So we already knew that lame cows got thin because lame cows don't compete very well. They don't eat as much. They do get thin. But Rodrigo and others, and this shout out to the group in Nottingham, University of Nottingham, they did some great work on the digital fat pad, and they were able to show that thin cows get lame.
I'm starting to hear some cyclical.
It's cyclical here, yeah.
Yeah.
How thin? Quite thin. Under a body condition score of 2.5. And so while that fat pad story is quite exciting, I don't manage a dairy herd to have thin cows. I'm already trying to avoid that. We're already trying to minimize the loss in body condition score in early lactation. So I didn't find it a terribly useful, it's good knowledge, but it didn't really change the way I'm interacting with my herd managers and trying to tell them how to prevent lameness, because we were kind of already doing that.
Yeah.
So there's another possibility here. And this is perhaps the most exciting one to me, and again comes from really great work from the Nottingham group. This is a paper by Newsom, and they looked at healthy feet and diseased feet, cows with prior lameness, and they were able to show these kind of ugly bony changes of the pedal bone relative to the nice smooth normal pedal bone that you see here. And those bony changes are a result of inflammation.
Okay.
So if you understand inflammation is the cause of that change, and those changes are permanent, then you've got another pathway for why these lesions occur, but also why they tend to recur and become chronic. Because whatever's happening inside the foot, we can do some trimming and some treatment to get the cow over the very painful episode.
Yeah, but what do you do when
But
it's going inside?
Yeah, you can't fix the damage inside, and so those cows are always susceptible to become lame later on. And so when I was thinking about that, and I was just coming off because I'm old, a bout of plantar fasciitis.
I actually, the entire time you've been talking about this, I have been thinking about the plantar fasciitis in my foot.
Yeah. And any doctor will tell you that's inflammation, yeah? Now, the anatomy's all different, yeah. So
Sure.
we're not walking on our toes. We've got a different anatomy. But if you look at the epidemiology of plantar fasciitis, it's people that have jobs where they stand a lot. So they're at greater risk. And so there's already in the human literature this pathway where purely standing can cause inflammation.
Now I have to reevaluate. Do I stand a lot?
Well, you've got that stupid standing desk that I've told you it's no good. You need to sit down while you're working. So now we've got this scenario where we know that the lesion is caused by pressure and displacement of the pedal bone. Okay, and that causes injury to the corium, the tissue that produces that horn. It gets squeezed, It runs out of nutrients. It can't produce healthy horn. It damages the corium, so you get serum and blood oozing into the tissues that are being created. And again, in the worst scenarios, an ulcer forms where horn is just shut down. So we used to think it was acidosis.
Yeah.
And, people still cling to that. And I'm not ruling it out.
Okay.
It's still a possibility. But Gary Edsel probably did more challenges to create ruminal acidosis in cattle than anybody on the planet.
Yeah.
And never created a hoof lesion. It was very disappointing.
Yeah, that would have been great.
Lots of
collab
other good stuff that acidosis causes, stellate lesions in the rumen and so on. Lots of reasons why you avoid, feeding lots of carbohydrate and creating acidosis. But probably laminitis and this change, probably a rare event.
Okay.
So not as common as we thought. And then we have the story of the hormonal changes at calving time, those hormones impacting these gelatoproteases and those enzymes remodeling and causing elasticity to the collagen and elastin of the suspensory apparatus, potentially creating a risk factor in early lactation for that displacement of the pedal bone.
I remember something about thin cows.
Yep, all good and all true. The thin cow piece is this here working through a lack of cushion, changes to the digital fat pad. But remember, usually in very thin cows, so under body condition score 2, 2.5. And then finally we've got this inflammation. The inflammatory changes here are causing permanent changes to the bone. And that for me is the most exciting kind of part of it, really.
And as you say that, you don't say it very excitedly.
Oh, I am so excited.
Sure.
Because in all the experiments creating hoof lesions, going back to Christer's study where he had two levels of diet, 2 housing treatments, calving, the environment was always recognized as a secondary factor that made the results worse. Yeah. But we've got the possibility here that it isn't a secondary factor. It's a primary factor. And that, I think, is what I've kind of clung to over the last few years, is realizing that let's fix the environment.
I love it.
And when you do that, the risk of all these other things tends to lessen quite a lot. So for me, the environmental piece of this, and just the fact that cows stand and create inflammation of the tissues in their claw, and that's what leads to sole hemorrhage and sole ulceration, that's the exciting thing, because we have a solution for that. I can't really fix the thin cows. I can't do anything with hormones at calving time. It happens. They happen. We can feed to prevent ruminal acidosis. That's easy. It's all in the standing, Courtney.
I feel like this is another cookism coming.
No, this is from Nick Bell. So shout out to Nick, because he's just moved from the UK to Australia. So big, gigantic movements for Nick.
This is news to me.
Yep, but he was the first to put this slide together and say, it's in the name, folks. That's sole ulcer, standing up disease. Just think of it as cows that are standing too long, and fix that.
And that is something you can fix.
Yes, and we've got lots of ways to do that.
Yeah.
And, shocker, when we do this, how many sole ulcers do we have in our dairy herds, in these, well-managed, well-housed herds?
None to few?
Hardly any. To the point where, poor old Gerard Kramer's up there in Minnesota trying to do hoof trimming studies. And you do it all on these farms that have good hoof trimming programs where you've got good control. God, it's tough to find a sole ulcer in these herds. It
Poor
really is.
Gerard.
So we don't see sole ulcers in grazing herds very much, and we don't see very many of them in well-managed, well-housed, particularly sand-bedded free stalls, which dates back to my first experience of putting more bedding into a little 180 cow dairy.
Was this in the prehistoric ages?
Prehistoric. This was when I was a young veterinarian in the UK, Courtney. And this was on the back of work done by some students working for a veterinarian as a final year student project at the University of Bristol. They compared 2 herds, exactly the same kind of buildings, one where they had lots of straw, one without, and the one without had more lameness. The one with straw had less lameness. And so I went into a number of herds and remodeled these nasty old Newton rig dividers.
What are those?
Just terrible things, just terrible. We took pieces of metal out, put twisted ropes in the way, but above all, we just gave these cows just a sea of straw to lie in, and we got better lying times and less lameness as a result of it. So we now really talk about the pressure theory of clawhorn lesion development, Courtney.
Yeah.
It's pressure.
Okay.
Okay, so calving time, you got
Like
changes
the
in
pressure
the
you give me to get
the pressure to do
everything
more
done
and
on
more
time.
podcasts, editing, all the work that you do.
Yeah.
We appreciate you so much.
I'm sure you really mean that.
Oh, we do. We do. The listener and I,
The one
we
listener.
very much appreciate you. So potential for changes to the structure of the claw around calving time driven by hormonal changes. That leads to displacement of the pedal bone. Loss of body condition score, loss of the digital fat pad leads to less cushioning. So again, we're building up pressure. Increased standing time because of standing on concrete, poor stall design where we're not lying down enough, causing inflammation of the bony exostoses that form on the pedal bone, the third phalanx. And then that coupled with hoof overgrowth of not having a good hoof care program leads to this pressure, this weight build-up on that typical site where that ulcer forms.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it as a sort of build-up of pressure and ways that we can release that pressure through good hoof care, good trimming, through better housing.
Yeah, comfortable place to rest.
Exactly. So what I realized is there's two roles for cow comfort in this story, and what I call the get lame, stay lame hypothesis. So if you think of herd lameness dynamics, cows are getting lame, so you're getting new cases, new lesions, new cases of lameness. But also you have the chronicity problem of cows staying lame for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to factor those in. So decreased lying time and poor trimming and hoof overload can create new cases of lameness. Cows get lame. And that's the first role of comfort, of poor comfort. But we also know that once a cow becomes lame,
she stays lame.
They change their behavior, and that change in behavior can result in those cows staying lame for a protracted period of time. So they have abnormal resting behavior. We've talked about that at length. And if we don't recognize those cows and get them treated early, then they become chronic and problem cows in the herd.
Mm-hmm.
So the dual roles of cow comfort. It's taken quite a long time to do studies to prove the first bit, the get lame piece, because there's so much chronicity. It's hard to show new cases of lameness forming caused by an intervention.
Makes sense.
And so you have to do a pretty good study to do that. Now we've got a number of studies, both in housed herds and grazing herds, where we've shown about a 2-hour-a-day increase in standing time per day in early lactation increases the risk of sole ulcer and sole hemorrhage later in lactation. So there is an insult to poor cow comfort through the transition period and in early lactation that can have lameness consequences later on.
Is there any research connected to heat stress and
Yeah, we've
ulcers?
seen that both in terms of new cases of lameness, but also the chronicity piece, where cows that are susceptible to becoming lame again do so in the summer because of that extra weight bearing. And this is data that's a little complicated to look at. We'll just focus on the sole ulcer piece. We've got parity 1, 2, and 3 cows here. And we've got the incidence of lameness here in the second lactation relative to whether they had an ulcer or not in the prior lactation. So if they didn't, the incidence was 12%. If they did have a lesion in the prior lactation, it's 44%.
Yikes.
3 to 4-fold higher. And you see that in the next lactation and in the next lactation. So that getting lame to start with really sets you up for a bad future because of those permanent changes within the claw that we really can't fix that make the cow susceptible to developing those lesions again and again in subsequent lactations. So the stay lame piece is really the loss of structural integrity of the claw, and you kind of see that again here in these pictures. And again, epidemiologically, the folks at Nottingham have shown 80% of lameness cases may be attributable to a prior lameness event in a lot of dairy herds. So it isn't new cases occurring all the time. It's cases occurring again and again in the same animals. So a case of lameness lasts 2 to 5 weeks longer in older cows versus parity 1 cows. So age is a problem.
It does play a role.
Yeah, as I get up in the morning and hobbled.
I was thinking of a good comeback there for you.
Yeah. I feel for our older cows, and again, it's related to these permanent changes that are occurring to the skeleton built up by inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've shown you this one.
There are ways to prevent this.
There are ways to prevent that, and the magic of sand is that cushion and traction and support that allows healthy cows and cows with sore feet to get up and down and maintain a normal rhythm of rest and recovery. That's important. So stall design, stall comfort, control of stocking density to make sure that the cow has an access to a place to lie down, minimizing time away from the pen to 3.5 hours a day, typically for our 3X herds for milking. And you mentioned it, heat stress, of trying to provide sufficient air movement and the use of water to help cool the cows during the summer and keep them lying down so that cows rest when they want to, for as long as they want to. For as long as they need to.
How did I mess that up?
I've messed it up again,
a million
Courtney.
times.
So that's where we've been at, and the resources we have on the Dairyland Initiative will hopefully guide you to do that. But we also have our Life Step Lameness module, which goes through a lot more detail of this stuff and gives you a framework for how to go about resolving some of these problems in dairy herds.
Well, I appreciate you not showing many
grizzly pictures.
Yeah, it was okay. My breakfast stayed down.
Good.
Hopefully you guys took away something from today's episode. And obviously we've done a lot of other episodes on ways to address heat stress and optimize rest. So feel free to go back and look at those if you want more on how to prevent sole ulcers by reducing standing time.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. The Dairyland Initiative is supported by industry leaders who are advancing cow comfort worldwide. We would like to say a special thank you to our premier sponsor, Saputo, who is providing the global community with high-quality dairy products made from high-quality milk from healthy and well-cared-for animals. We'd also like to say thank you to our other sponsors, SaveCows.com, Zinpro, GPS Dairy Consulting, 40 Barn, SureGain Trow Nutrition, Munters, J&D Manufacturing, VES Artex, Ventec, and Kestrel Instruments. Thanks for tuning in to the Dairyland Initiative podcast. Want more Dairyland Initiative? Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, follow us on our socials, and visit our website for all of the latest recommendations in dairy cattle housing and management. See you next time.